Sometimes children see more than we think they see, hear more than we realize they hear, and understand far more than we give them credit for. Sometimes the answers that come from the mouths of our youngest family members reveal truths we've been trying to hide, wisdom we didn't know they possessed, and awareness of struggles we thought we'd kept secret. These moments remind us that kids are always watching, always learning, always absorbing the world around them in ways that can surprise and humble us. If you believe in the incredible perceptiveness of children, the power of family bonds even through difficult times, and the wisdom that sometimes comes from the least expected sources, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that show us the extraordinary awareness and compassion that children bring to our lives when we take the time to really listen to what they're trying to tell us. The Johnson family from Portland, Oregon, stood on the Family Feud stage on a Wednesday afternoon that seemed like it would be just another fun taping of America's favorite game show. There was Richard Johnson, the father, a 40-year-old IT specialist with a warm smile and dad jokes, ready to deploy at any moment, standing next to his wife Angela, a 38-year-old elementary school teacher whose gentle demeanor and quick wit made her a natural at the game. Next to Angela stood their daughter Nicole, age 16, then their son Marcus, age 14, and finally, at the end of the line, their youngest 10-year-old Cameron, who was bouncing on his toes with barely contained excitement at being on his favorite television show. The Johnson family had been selected out of thousands of applicants, and they'd spent weeks preparing, watching old episodes, practicing common survey answers, and building their family teamwork. What they hadn't prepared for was the moment when their youngest child would give an answer so profound, so unexpectedly insightful, that it would stop the game, break his parents' hearts, and ultimately change their family forever. Steve Harvey greeted the Johnson family with his signature enthusiasm, immediately gravitating toward young Cameron, who was wearing a bow tie that Steve complimented with genuine appreciation. "Look at you, young man," Steve said, adjusting Cameron's bow tie with a grin. "You came dressed to impress. I like that. What's your name?" "Cameron, sir," the boy said with a huge smile. "I'm 10 years old and this is the best day of my whole life." Steve laughed. "The best day of your whole life. That's high praise. Are you a Family Food fan?" Cameron nodded vigorously. "I watch it every single day after school. I know all the answers before the contestants say them. My dad says I should try out for Jeopardy when I grow up, but I told him Family Feud is better because it's about families working together, not just one person being smart alone." Steve looked impressed. "That's a very wise way to think about it, Cameron. And speaking of families working together, are you ready to help your family win some money today?" Cameron's expression became serious and determined. "Yes, sir, Mr. Harvey. My family really needs this money, and I'm going to do my best to help them win." There was something in the way Cameron said it, a weight in those words that suggested he understood more about his family's financial situation than a typical 10-year-old might, but Steve didn't press the issue. The game needed to start, and there would be time to explore deeper conversations later if the moment presented itself. Little did Steve know that Cameron would create that moment himself in the most unexpected way possible. The Johnson family played well through the first few rounds, trading points back and forth with the competing family, the Martinez clan from Arizona. Richard showed off his knowledge of sports statistics. Angela's teaching background helped her nail questions about school supplies and children's activities. Nicole brought her teenage perspective to questions about social media and pop culture. And Marcus contributed solid answers about video games and music. But Cameron, sitting at the end of the line, hadn't had a chance to answer yet, and Steve could see the boy was getting antsy, eager for his turn to contribute. That turn came in the fourth round, when the Johnsons needed just 30 more points to win the game and advance to fast money. Steve read the question with his usual dramatic flair. "We asked 100 people, what is something parents do for their children that the children don't appreciate until they're grown up?" The question hung in the air as Richard stepped up to the buzzer to face off against the Martinez family patriarch. The two men hit their buzzers simultaneously, but Richard was a fraction of a second faster. "Work hard to provide," Richard answered confidently. Steve nodded approvingly. "Good answer, good answer." Survey said. The board revealed it as the number one answer with 41 points, and the Johnson family cheered. Richard chose to play rather than pass, confident his family could clear the board. Angela was up next. "Name something parents do for their children that children don't appreciate until they're grown up." "Put a roof over their heads," Angela said without hesitation. Steve smiled. "That's a good answer. That's a practical answer." Survey said, number 3 answer, 18 points. The family was doing well. Nicole stepped up. "Say no to things we want," she offered, speaking from recent teenage experience of not getting everything she asked for. Steve laughed. "Oh, I know that's right. Every parent in this room has had to say no." "Let's see if it's on the board," Survey said. Number 4 answer, 15 points. Marcus took his turn. "Teach us right from wrong," he said, and Steve gave him an approving nod. "That's important, young man. That's how you stay out of trouble." Survey said. Number 5 answer, 12 points. The board still had 2 answers unrevealed, and the Johnson family had 1 strike because Angela's mother, playing as their 5th member, had guest help with homework, which wasn't on the board. They needed to find one of the 2 remaining answers to avoid giving the Martinez family a chance to steal. Cameron stepped up to the podium, his small frame barely reaching the top, his bow tie slightly askew from the excitement of the game, his face set with concentration. Steve bent down to his level. "All right, Cameron, this is your moment, buddy. We need one of these last 2 answers. What is something parents do for their children that children don't appreciate until they're grown up? No pressure, but your family is counting on you." Cameron looked at the board, studying the revealed answers, thinking carefully. Then he looked at Steve with an expression that seemed far too mature for a 10-year-old face. "Mr. Harvey," Cameron said slowly, his voice clear and steady, "parents sacrifice their own happiness to make sure their kids are happy. They give up things they want and things they need so their kids can have what they need. And kids don't know about it because parents are really good at hiding when they're struggling or scared or worried. But when you grow up, you realize everything your parents gave up for you, and that's when you appreciate it." The studio fell completely silent. Steve Harvey stood frozen, staring at this 10-year-old boy who had just delivered one of the most profound answers he'd heard in his years of hosting Family Feud. Richard and Angela's expressions changed dramatically. The smiles fell from their faces, replaced by shock and then barely controlled emotion. Angela's hand flew to her mouth as tears immediately filled her eyes. Richard's jaw clenched as he fought to keep his composure. Both parents were staring at their youngest child, realizing in that moment that Cameron knew. He knew about the struggles they'd been so careful to hide from their children. He knew about the sacrifices they'd been making. He knew about the financial stress and the difficult decisions and the things they'd been doing without so their kids wouldn't have to. Steve, sensing that something significant had just happened beyond a simple game show answer, spoke gently. "Cameron, that's a very specific and very mature answer. Can you tell me why you gave that particular answer?" Cameron looked at his parents, saw the tears in his mother's eyes, and his own eyes began to water. "Because that's what my mom and dad do," he said simply. "They think I don't notice, but I do. I notice that mom wears the same 3 outfits to work every week because she bought me and Marcus new clothes for school instead of buying anything for herself. I notice that dad's car is making a weird noise, but he won't get it fixed because he said the money needs to go to Nicole's college fund. I notice that they eat smaller portions at dinner and tell us they're not very hungry, but really they're making sure there's enough food for us kids to have seconds if we want. I notice that they don't go out on dates anymore or buy things for themselves or do fun stuff because they're saving every penny to make sure we have what we need." The studio audience collectively gasped, many people immediately tearing up at this child's awareness of his parents' sacrifices. Steve had to take a moment to compose himself before he could respond. "Cameron," Steve said carefully, "how long have you known about this? Have your parents talked to you about money being tight?" Cameron shook his head. "They never talk about it in front of us. They always say everything is fine and we don't need to worry about anything. But I hear them at night sometimes when they think we're all asleep. I hear them talking about bills and medical costs and how they're going to pay for things. I heard Dad tell Mom that he picked up extra weekend shifts at work, and I heard Mom crying because she feels bad that Dad has to work so much. They try to hide it from us, but I pay attention. I see things." Richard stepped forward, his voice breaking. "Buddy, you weren't supposed to know about any of that. We've been trying to protect you kids from worrying about adult problems." Cameron turned to his father with tears streaming down his face. "I know you were trying to protect us, Dad, but I want you to know that I see what you and Mom do for us. I see how hard you work and how much you give up. And I appreciate it even though I'm not grown up yet. You don't have to wait until I'm an adult to know that I'm grateful for everything you do." Angela couldn't hold back anymore and left her position in the line to pull Cameron into a tight hug, sobbing openly. Nicole and Marcus, also in tears now, joined the embrace, the whole Johnson family holding each other in the middle of the Family Feud stage, while Steve Harvey watched with his hand over his heart, and the audience cried along with them. After several moments, Steve gently interrupted. "I hate to break up this beautiful family moment, but we do need to see if Cameron's answer is on the board, because if it is, I have a feeling it's going to be the #1 answer." Steve looked at the board. Cameron said parents sacrifice their own happiness and needs for their children. Survey said the board revealed the #2 answer, sacrifice their own needs and wants, worth 23 points. The Johnson family had cleared the board and won the round, advancing to fast money, but nobody was celebrating the game anymore. The real victory was the conversation that had been opened, the awareness that had been acknowledged, the love that had been expressed. Steve called for a break in taping, something he rarely did, because he needed to talk to the Johnson family off camera before continuing. During the break, Steve sat down with Richard and Angela while the kids were being given snacks by production assistants. "Talk to me," Steve said to the parents. What's going on with your family? Why is a 10-year-old boy so aware of financial struggles that you've been trying to hide? Richard and Angela looked at each other, deciding how much to share, and then Angela began to speak. 2 years ago, our middle child, Marcus, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. The medical costs have been devastating even with insurance. We have good insurance through my teaching job, but the copays for insulin, the continuous glucose monitor, the doctor visits, the emergency room trips when his blood sugar gets too high or too low, it all adds up so fast. We've spent over $30,000 out of pocket in the last 2 years just trying to keep Marcus healthy. Richard continued the story. On top of Marcus's medical cost, my mother had a stroke last year and she needs full-time care. We're helping pay for her nursing home because she doesn't have long-term care insurance and her savings ran out. We're also trying to save for Nicole's college because she's a junior and she'll be applying next year. We both work full-time. I picked up weekend consulting work, Angela tutors after school, and we've cut every expense we can. We stopped our streaming services. We don't eat out. We buy generic everything. We shop at thrift stores. We've done everything possible to make ends meet. But we never wanted our kids to feel the stress of it. We wanted them to just be kids, to not worry about money, to feel secure and loved and provided for. Angela wiped her tears. We didn't realize Cameron was paying such close attention. He's always been an observant child, very empathetic, very aware of other people's emotions. But we thought we were hiding it well enough. Hearing him say those things on stage, realizing he's been carrying this awareness and worrying about us, that breaks my heart. He shouldn't have to think about these things at 10 years old. Steve nodded with understanding. But here's what I want you to hear. Cameron doesn't seem burdened by knowing. He seems grateful. He wanted you to know that he sees your sacrifice and he appreciates it. That's a gift, not a burden. And maybe him knowing isn't the worst thing, because now you don't have to carry this alone as parents. Your family can acknowledge what you're going through and support each other through it. Steve made a decision in that moment. When we go back to tape Fast Money, we're going to do it a little differently than usual. I'm going to ask Cameron to participate, and I want you to let him speak honestly if he wants to. Can you do that? Richard and Angela nodded, trusting Steve's instincts. The family returned to the stage, Cameron's eyes still red from crying, but his bow tie straightened and his determination renewed. Steve addressed the cameras before starting Fast Money. Ladies and gentlemen, we just experienced something very special on this stage. A 10-year-old boy reminded us all that children are far more perceptive than we give them credit for, and that the sacrifices parents make don't go unnoticed even when we think they do. The Johnson family is going to play Fast Money now, and whatever happens with the money, I think they've already won something far more valuable. Angela went first in Fast Money, scoring a solid 162 points. When Richard stepped up for his turn, Steve paused before starting the questions. Richard, I just want to say that you and your wife are doing an incredible job. The fact that Cameron is aware enough and mature enough to articulate what he said today is a testament to the values you've instilled in him. Richard nodded, too emotional to speak. Steve proceeded with the 5 Fast Money questions, and Richard answered them all quickly and competently. When they revealed his score, Richard had earned 91 additional points for a total of 253 points. The Johnson family had won the $20,000. Confetti fell, the family celebrated, but Steve wasn't finished. He called Cameron back to the podium. Cameron, you're the one who really won this game today. Not just because your answer helped your family clear that board, but because you reminded all of us, everyone in this studio and everyone watching at home, to pay attention to the people we love, to notice their sacrifices, to appreciate what they do for us, even when they're trying to hide their struggles. That's wisdom that some people don't learn in a lifetime, and you've got it at 10 years old. Cameron smiled through his tears. I learned it from watching my parents, Mr. Harvey. They show me every day what love looks like. Love looks like working when you're tired, giving when you don't have much to give, and always putting your family first. Steve turned to the cameras. This family just won $20,000, and while I know that money is going to help them with medical bills and college funds and all the practical things they need, I want to do something more. Steve pulled out his phone. I'm calling my foundation right now, and we're going to make sure Marcus has the medical supplies he needs for the next year. All his insulin, all his testing supplies, all his medical equipment, we're going to cover it. The Johnson family won't have to choose between medical care and college savings anymore. The audience erupted in applause as Angela and Richard broke down completely, overwhelmed by the generosity and the relief of having some of their burden lifted. But Steve still wasn't done, and for Nicole, our college-bound junior, my foundation has a scholarship program. We're going to make sure that when Nicole applies to colleges next year, she has a full scholarship waiting for her at one of our partner schools. Your parents won't have to choose between your education and their financial survival. Nicole burst into tears and hugged Steve tightly. And one more thing, Steve said, Cameron, you mentioned your dad's car is making a noise and he won't get it fixed. "What kind of car does your dad drive?" A 2008 Honda Civic. Cameron said, "It's a good car, but it's old and stuff keeps breaking." Steve nodded. "Well, I have a friend who owns a Honda dealership here in Los Angeles. I'm going to make sure your dad's car gets a full inspection and any repairs it needs completely free. Because a man who works as hard as your father works needs reliable transportation." Richard, who'd been trying to maintain his composure, finally lost it completely, sobbing with his face in his hands as the weight of years of stress and struggle finally had somewhere to go, released in tears of relief and gratitude. His wife held him, his children surrounded him, and Steve Harvey stood back and let the family have their moment. "This is what it's all about," Steve said to the cameras, his own voice thick with emotion. "This is why we do what we do. Not for the game, not for the ratings, but for moments like this when we can help families who are doing everything right, working hard, sacrificing, loving each other, and still struggling." The Johnson family represents millions of American families who are barely holding on despite doing everything they're supposed to do. And if we can ease that burden even a little bit, then this show has a purpose beyond entertainment. The episode aired 6 weeks later and became the most watched Family Feud episode in the show's modern era, reaching over 15 million viewers and generating hundreds of millions of views online. Cameron's answer and the revelation of his awareness of his parents' struggles resonated with families across the country and around the world. Parents wrote in to say the episode had prompted them to have more honest conversations with their children about family finances and challenges, not to burden them, but to acknowledge what they might already know and help them process it in healthy ways. Children and teenagers wrote in to say Cameron had inspired them to express appreciation for their parents more openly and to pay attention to the sacrifices being made on their behalf. But the impact went beyond individual families. The episode sparked a national conversation about the crushing costs of chronic illness, particularly type 1 diabetes and the astronomical price of insulin in the United States. Advocacy groups used Cameron's story to push for legislation capping insulin costs and expanding healthcare coverage. The story of the Johnsons working multiple jobs and still struggling financially despite having insurance became a powerful illustration of the gaps in the American healthcare system. Within a year of the episode airing, several states had passed laws limiting out-of-pocket costs for insulin, directly referencing Cameron's revelation about his family's medical expenses as part of the legislative justification. The Johnson family's life changed dramatically in the wake of their appearance. The financial support from Steve Harvey's foundation allowed Angela and Richard to cut back on their extra work, giving them time to actually be present with their children instead of constantly working to make ends meet. Marcus's diabetes management became less stressful when they didn't have to ration supplies or delay doctor's appointments due to cost concerns. Nicole received a full scholarship to the University of Oregon, where she studied social work with a focus on helping families navigate medical crisis and financial hardship. And Cameron, who had accidentally become the face of childhood awareness and family appreciation, continued to be the observant, empathetic child he'd always been, but now his parents no longer tried to hide their struggles from him entirely. Instead, the Johnson family found a new balance, being honest with their children about challenges, while also being careful not to burden them with adult worries. They held regular family meetings where everyone could share concerns and successes, where Cameron and his siblings could ask questions about family finances and future plans, and where Richard and Angela could be transparent about what they were working toward and how the kids could contribute in age-appropriate ways. The family became closer than ever, bound not just by love, but by mutual respect, by acknowledgement of each person's role and contributions, and by a shared commitment to supporting each other through whatever challenges came their way. 2 years after their Family Feud appearance, Cameron, now 12 years old, was invited to speak at a national conference for families affected by chronic illness. He stood at the podium, still small for his age, but carrying himself with the same quiet confidence he'd shown on that game show stage. "I'm here to talk about what I've learned from having a brother with type 1 diabetes and from watching my parents handle the stress of medical costs and everything else that comes with having a sick family member." Cameron began, "The biggest thing I've learned is that kids know more than you think we know. We see when our parents are stressed. We notice when there's not as much food in the fridge, or when the heat gets turned down to save money, or when our parents stop buying things for themselves. We're not oblivious just because we're young." Cameron continued, his voice gaining strength. "But here's the thing that adults need to understand. When you hide your struggles from us, when you pretend everything is fine when it's not, you're not protecting us. You're just making us feel confused and anxious because we know something is wrong, but we don't know what it is or how to help." When my parents finally started being more honest with me and my siblings about what our family was going through, it actually made me feel better, not worse. Because I understood why we couldn't do certain things, and I knew how I could help, and I felt like part of the team instead of just a kid being sheltered from reality. The audience of parents and caregivers listened intently, many of them recognizing their own families in Cameron's words. So my advice to parents is this, Cameron said. Don't underestimate what your kids can handle. Be honest with them in age-appropriate ways. Let them know when things are hard and let them help in whatever ways they can. When I found out about my brother's medical costs, my parents started letting me help by doing extra chores to reduce their workload, by being more careful not to waste food or leave lights on, by being understanding when we couldn't afford things I wanted. And that made me feel good because I was contributing to our family's well-being. Kids want to help. We want to be part of the solution. Don't shut us out just because you think we're too young to understand. The conference attendees gave Cameron a standing ovation, many of them approaching him afterward to thank him for giving voice to something their own children had probably been feeling but couldn't articulate. Steve Harvey, who had been invited to the conference as a keynote speaker, watched Cameron's presentation with immense pride. After Cameron finished, Steve took the stage. "You all just heard from one of the wisest young people I've ever met. Cameron Johnson taught me something important 2 years ago when his family appeared on Family Feud. He taught me that when we try to shield our children from every difficult truth, we're not necessarily doing them a favor. We're denying them the opportunity to develop resilience, empathy, and the sense of agency that comes from being able to contribute to their family's well-being." Now, Steve continued, "I'm not saying we should burden our children with adult problems or make them feel responsible for solving financial crises. But there's a balance between burdening them and being honest with them. And Cameron showed us what happens when kids are included in the family's reality in appropriate ways. They rise to the occasion. They show compassion and maturity. They find ways to help that make them feel valued and important." 5 years after the Family Feud episode that had changed their lives, the entire Johnson family returned to the show for a special "Where Are They Now?" segment. Cameron, now 15 years old and towering over Steve instead of barely reaching the podium, stood with his family and reflected on that day. "Looking back, I'm so glad I gave that answer even though I didn't plan to reveal what I knew about our family's struggles. It opened up a conversation that needed to happen, and it brought our family closer together. We still face challenges. Marcus still has diabetes, and that's never going away. But we face everything together now instead of my parents trying to handle everything alone while pretending nothing is wrong. That honesty has made our family stronger." Angela, now completely debt-free thanks to the combination of the game show winnings and the support from Steve's foundation, spoke about what the experience had taught her as a parent. "I spent so much energy trying to hide our struggles from our kids because I thought that was what good parents did. I thought providing for them meant shielding them from every hardship. But Cameron taught me that kids are more resilient and more capable than we give them credit for. They can handle the truth, and in fact, they often already know more than we realize. Being honest with them, letting them be part of our family's journey through hard times, that didn't damage them. It strengthened them, and it strengthened us as a family." Richard, who had since been promoted at his job and was able to stop working weekends, added his perspective. "That day on Family Feud, when Cameron gave that answer, my first feeling was failure. I felt like I had failed as a father because my son knew we were struggling, because I couldn't provide well enough to hide our problems from him. But Steve helped me understand that Cameron knowing didn't mean I had failed. It meant Cameron was paying attention, that he loved us enough to notice, and that he was developing empathy and awareness that would serve him well in life. Now, I'm proud that my kids understand hard work and sacrifice, that they don't take things for granted, that they appreciate what they have because they understand what it costs." The segment ended with a powerful message from Steve Harvey to parents watching at home. If your children are more aware of your struggles than you realize, if they've been noticing your sacrifices, even though you thought you were hiding them, don't be ashamed. The fact that they notice means you've raised observant, empathetic children who pay attention to the people they love. And maybe, just maybe, it's okay to let them know they're not wrong. To acknowledge that yes, things are hard sometimes, but that's okay because families face hard things together. You don't have to pretend to be superhuman and invulnerable. You can be honest about being human and still be the hero in your children's eyes. In fact, your children might respect you more for being real with them than for pretending everything is always perfect. If Cameron's story resonated with you, if you've ever been a child who noticed more than your parents realized, or a parent trying to shield your kids from struggles they already know about, if you believe in honest communication between parents and children, even about difficult topics, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this story with other families who might need to hear it, families who are working hard and sacrificing and doing everything right but still struggling. Families who think they're hiding their challenges from their kids when those kids are already aware and just waiting for permission to acknowledge what they see. Leave a comment sharing your own experience with family struggles, whether you were the child who knew more than you let on or the parent who was surprised by how much your kids understood. Let's create a community that supports honest, age-appropriate communication within families, that celebrates the awareness and empathy of children, and that reminds struggling parents that their kids' knowledge of difficult times doesn't mean they've failed. Cameron showed us that children who understand sacrifice often grow into adults who appreciate effort, value hard work, and understand that love isn't measured in what you can buy, but in what you're willing to give up. His answer on Family Feud erupted into a national conversation about family honesty, financial struggle, and the wisdom of children. Let's keep that conversation going. Subscribe, share, and most importantly, have the honest conversations with the people you love. They probably already know more than you think, and acknowledging the truth might be the first step toward facing your challenges together instead of alone. Thank you for being part of this community that values family, honesty, and the incredible perceptiveness of the next generation.